The axe slipped from Penelope Barrett's trembling hands for the third time that morning, landing with a dull thud in the dirt beside the chopping block. And she knew with absolute certainty that she would freeze to death before Christmas if she could not split enough wood to keep her small cabin warm through the brutal Texas winter that everyone in Alpine kept warning was coming early this year. Her fingers were already numb despite the wool gloves she wore, threadbare and full of holes but the only pair she owned. The November wind swept down from the mountains with a vicious bite that seemed to cut right through her thin coat, a garment that had seen better days back in St. Louis before her husband, Thomas, had dragged her out to this unforgiving corner of West Texas with promises of land and opportunity. Those promises had died with him 6 months ago when his horse had thrown him during a storm, leaving her alone with a half-built cabin, 40 acres of rocky soil, and debts she had no way to pay. She bent to retrieve the axe again, her back screaming in protest. The doctor in town had told her she had strained something when she had tried to move a fallen beam by herself last month, but she could not afford his services beyond that initial visit. Everything hurt now, all the time. Her hands were covered in blisters that had burst and bled and formed calluses, but even those calluses were splitting in the cold. She had been a schoolteacher once, her hands soft, and used to holding nothing heavier than a piece of chalk. Now she could barely recognize them as her own. The wood pile was pathetically small. She had perhaps enough to last a week, maybe 2 if she rationed carefully and spent most of her time huddled under every blanket she owned. But winter in Alpine could last 4 months, and she had already heard stories of people freezing in their beds during the coldest snaps. She had to keep trying. She lifted the axe again, positioning a log on the chopping block with her other hand. The axe came down at an angle, glancing off the wood and nearly hitting her leg. She stumbled backward, catching herself before she fell. Tears of frustration burned in her eyes, but she blinked them away furiously. Crying would not help anything. Crying was a luxury she could not afford. "Madam, you are going to hurt yourself doing it that way." The voice startled her so badly that she dropped the axe again and spun around, her heart hammering in her chest. A man sat astride a large bay horse not 20 feet away, and she had no idea how long he had been watching her struggle. He was tall even sitting down. She could tell that much, with broad shoulders outlined against the pale autumn sky. He wore a heavy canvas coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, and there was something about the easy way he sat his horse that marked him as someone who had spent more time in the saddle than out of it. "I did not hear you ride up," she said, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. A woman alone had to be careful. There were good men in this territory, but there were also plenty who would take advantage of someone in her situation. "Did not mean to startle you," he said, swinging down from his horse with a fluid motion. "I was riding past and saw you working. Or trying to work." He took a few steps closer and she got a better look at his face. He was younger than she had first thought, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. His eyes were a striking gray-green, like sage in the rain. "My name is Harrison Garrett. I work for the Double R Ranch about 10 miles north of here." "Penelope Barrett," she said, drawing herself up to her full height, which was still several inches shorter than him. "I appreciate your concern, but I am managing just fine." His eyes flicked to the tiny wood pile, then to her bloodied gloves, then back to her face. He did not say anything, but his expression was polite skepticism. "Really, I am fine," she insisted, feeling heat rise in her cheeks despite the cold. "I just need to practice more." "Madam, with all due respect, practice is not going to help if you are using the wrong technique," he said. And even with the right technique, splitting wood takes a certain amount of arm strength that. He trailed off, clearly trying to find a diplomatic way to phrase it. That I do not have, she finished flatly. Yes, I am aware of that, but I do not have much choice in the matter, do I? The wood will not split itself, and I cannot afford to pay anyone to do it for me. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes. Is your husband not around to help? My husband is dead, she said, and was proud of how steady her voice remained. He passed in May. It is just me now. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, studying her. She lifted her chin and met his gaze, refusing to look away first. She might be poor and desperate and half-starved, but she still had her pride. How much wood do you have split already? He asked finally. She gestured at the meager pile. That is all of it. That will not last you more than a couple weeks, he said. You need 10 times that amount to make it through winter, at least. I am aware of that as well, she said sharply. As I said, I am working on it. He looked at the pile again, then at the forest of unsplit logs stacked haphazardly near her cabin. Thomas had at least managed to cut down several trees before he died, but he had never gotten around to splitting them into manageable pieces. She had been trying for weeks now and had precious little to show for her efforts. I will split it for you, Harrison said abruptly. She blinked. I beg your pardon, the wood. I will split it for you. He was already walking toward the chopping block, rolling up his sleeves despite the cold. Where is your axe? That is very kind of you to offer, but I cannot accept, she said quickly. I cannot pay you. Did I ask for payment? He picked up the axe and tested its weight, then ran his thumb along the blade. This needs sharpening. You have a whetstone. Mr. Garrett, please, she said, moving to intercept him. I cannot just accept charity. It would not be proper. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she felt suddenly exposed under that steady gaze. She knew what he must see. A woman too thin, with shadows under her eyes and desperation written in every line of her face. Her dress was patched in multiple places, and the hem was thick with mud. She probably looked like a scarecrow. Madam, I do not know what happened back wherever you came from, but out here neighbors help neighbors, he said quietly. That is not charity. That is just what people do. Now, where is your whetstone? She wanted to argue more, but the truth was she needed help so desperately that she was not sure she could afford to turn it away, propriety be damned. In the cabin, she said finally. On the shelf by the door. She went to fetch it, her legs feeling weak beneath her. When she returned, Harrison had shed his heavy coat and was examining the pile of unsplit logs with a critical eye. He took the whetstone from her without a word and began sharpening the axe with long, practiced strokes. The sound of it rang out across her small property, rhythmic and somehow comforting. You really do not have to do this, she said, one last weak protest. I know I do not have to, he said, not looking up from his work, but I am going to anyway. Why don't you go inside where it is warm? This is going to take a while. It is not much warmer inside than it is out here, she admitted. I have been trying to conserve wood. His jaw tightened, but he did not comment. When the axe was sharp enough to suit him, he selected a log and set it on the chopping block. What followed was a revelation. The axe rose and fell with a steady rhythm, and each time it came down, the log split cleanly in two. He worked without apparent effort, though she could see the muscles in his forearms flexing with each swing. Within 10 minutes he had split more wood than she had managed in the entire morning. She stood and watched, mesmerized despite herself. There was something almost hypnotic about watching someone who truly knew what they were doing, who made hard physical labor look effortless. Harrison worked in silence, his breath coming out in white puffs in the cold air, sweat beginning to darken his shirt despite the temperature. After a while she realized she was standing there uselessly, and when to start stacking the split wood. He glanced over at her but did not tell her to stop. They fell into an unspoken rhythm. He split, she stacked. The pile began to grow. An hour passed, then two. The sun climbed higher in the sky but provided little warmth. Penelope's fingers were completely numb now, but she kept working, determined to at least contribute something. Harrison had shed his vest as well, and his shirt was damp with sweat. She tried not to notice the way it clung to his shoulders. Finally, when her stomach was growling audibly and she was starting to feel lightheaded, he paused and leaned the axe against the chopping block. "You got anything to eat?" he asked. "I skipped breakfast this morning." It was a lie, she was fairly certain, a polite fiction to allow her to accept his help without feeling completely useless. "I have some beans," she said, "and cornbread from yesterday. It is not much." "Sounds good to me," he said, following her toward the cabin. Inside, the small space was indeed barely warmer than outside. Her meager fire had burned down to embers in the small iron stove. Harrison glanced around, taking in the sparse furnishings, the cracks in the walls that she had tried to stuff with rags, the single narrow bed in the corner. She saw his jaw tighten again, but he still said nothing. She busied herself warming up the beans and slicing the cornbread, acutely aware of how inadequate the meal was. Harrison washed his hands in the basin by the door and sat down at her small table, his large frame making the furniture look almost doll-sized. "I appreciate you feeding me," he said when she set the plate in front of him. "I really was hungry." Another polite lie, but she appreciated it nonetheless. She served herself a smaller portion and sat across from him. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The beans were bland and the cornbread was dry, but Harrison ate without complaint. "How long were you and your husband married?" he asked after a while. 3 years, she said. "We met in St. Louis. He was from Texas originally, and he always talked about coming back here, starting a ranch. When he inherited this land from his uncle, he saw it as a sign." She pushed beans around her plate. "I was not sure about leaving the city, but he was so excited about it, and I loved him, so I came." "That was brave of you, or foolish," she said. "I am still deciding which." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Maybe both. Bravery and foolishness often look pretty similar." "You think I am foolish for trying to stay here on my own?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think you are doing the best you can with a bad situation. But I am not going to lie to you, madam. A woman alone out here with winter coming on and no resources. It is going to be hard, near impossible probably." "I have nowhere else to go," she said simply. "No family, no money for train fare even if I did. Thomas's debts consumed everything we had. If I leave, I lose the land, and the land is all I have left of him." Harrison nodded slowly. "I understand that, but land cannot keep you warm at night, and it cannot protect you if something happens." "I know," she said quietly, "but I have to try. The alternative is—" She trailed off, not wanting to voice it. "The alternative is what?" She met his eyes. "The alternative is going back east and trying to find work in a factory, or marrying some man I do not love just for security. And I would rather freeze to death out here than do either of those things. At least out here I am free." Something flickered in his expression, respect maybe, or understanding. "Then I guess we had better make sure you do not freeze to death," he said. She felt something tight in her chest loosen just slightly. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You do not know me." "I could be anyone." "You are someone who needs help," he said with a shrug. "That is enough. Most people would not see it that way. I am not most people." He stood and carried his plate to the basin. "I should get back to work. I want to get at least half that would split before I have to head back to the ranch." "You are going back today?" She had not realized how much she had been counting on his presence until she felt the sharp stab of disappointment at his words. I have to, he said. I am expected back tonight. But I will come back tomorrow if that is all right with you, and the day after that if I need to. We will get all that would split, do not worry. Mr. Garrett, I cannot ask you to do that. You are not asking. I am offering. He headed for the door, then paused and looked back at her. And you can call me Harrison. Mr. Garrett makes me sound like my father, and trust me, that is not a comparison I enjoy. She found herself smiling despite everything. Then you should call me Penelope. Penelope, he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his voice. I will see you tomorrow, Penelope. He worked until the sun was lowering in the sky, until he had split enough wood to fill her small woodshed halfway. Before he left, he carried several armfuls into her cabin and stacked them neatly beside the stove. Burn as much as you need tonight, he told her. You have plenty now, and there will be more tomorrow. She watched him ride away, his figure growing smaller against the darkening landscape, and felt something she had not felt in a very long time: hope. True to his word, Harrison returned the next morning just after dawn. Penelope had been awake for hours, unable to sleep with anticipation. She had done her best to make herself presentable, washing her face in cold water and braiding her hair neatly, then felt foolish for caring what she looked like. He was just being a good neighbor. That was all. But when she opened the door and saw him riding up, his hat tipped back and a smile on his face, her heart gave a traitorous little skip. Morning, he called out, swinging down from his horse. Sleep well. Better than I have in months, she admitted. The cabin was actually warm for once. Good, he said with satisfaction. Let us see if we can finish up that wood today. They fell back into their rhythm from yesterday, him splitting, her stacking. But today he talked while he worked, telling her stories about the ranch where he worked, about the other hands and the ornery foreman who loved to bark orders but had a soft spot for stray dogs. She found herself laughing at his stories, a sound that felt strange in her throat after so many months of silence and grief. What about you? He asked during a break, wiping sweat from his brow. What were you doing back in St. Louis? I was a schoolteacher, she said. 5th grade. I loved it, actually. The children could be challenging, but there was something wonderful about watching them learn, seeing their faces light up when they understood something new. Why did you stop? Women are not supposed to teach once they marry, she said with a trace of bitterness. It was considered improper, so I had to give it up. That seems like a waste, Harrison said. If you were good at it, I mean. I like to think I was, she said, but it does not matter now. There is no school within 30 miles of here anyway. There should be, he said thoughtfully. There are enough families scattered around these parts. Kids growing up not knowing how to read or cipher properly. That is no good. Perhaps someday someone will start one, she said, not letting herself think about possibilities that seemed impossibly distant. By mid-afternoon, all of the wood was split. Harrison spent another hour stacking it properly, showing her how to arrange it so that air could circulate and it would stay dry. When he was finished, the woodshed was packed full, and there was another neat pile beside the cabin covered with canvas. This should last the winter, he said, standing back to survey his work. There was satisfaction in his voice, the pride of a job well done. Penelope stared at the wood, at the tangible proof that she might actually survive the coming months, and felt tears spring to her eyes. She tried to blink them back, but one escaped and ran down her cheek before she could stop it. Hey now, Harrison said, alarm clear in his voice. What is wrong? Did I stack it wrong? No, she managed, laughing even as more tears fell. No, you did it perfectly, I cannot believe you did all this for me. I do not know how to thank you. He looked uncomfortable, the way many men did when faced with female tears. You do not need to thank me, he said gruffly. I was happy to help. But you did not just help, she said, wiping at her eyes with her sleeve. "You saved my life. That is not an exaggeration. If you had not come along, I would have frozen to death this winter, and you did it asking for nothing in return." "Well," he said, scuffing his boot in the dirt, "maybe there is one thing you could do for me." Her heart sank. Of course there was. Of course he wanted something. Nothing in this world was truly free. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "You could let me come by and check on you sometimes," he said, still not quite meeting her eyes. "Just to make sure you are doing all right. These winters can be harsh, and there is always something that needs fixing or tending to. I would feel better knowing you were okay." That was not what she had been expecting. "That is all?" she asked cautiously. "That is all," he confirmed, finally looking at her. "Unless you would rather I stayed away, I do not want to impose or make you uncomfortable." "No," she said quickly. "No, I would like that. It gets lonely out here by myself." Something warm sparked in his eyes. "Then I will come by when I can. Probably once a week or so, if that is all right." "More than all right," she said, and meant it. He left as the sun was setting, and Penelope went inside and built up the fire in her stove without worrying about conserving wood. The cabin grew warm and cozy, and for the first time since Thomas's death, she felt something like contentment. Harrison came back 5 days later, arriving just before noon with a string of fish. "Caught these this morning," he said. "Figured you might like some fresh food for a change." She invited him in and they cooked the fish together, working side by side in her small cabin. It felt natural and easy, like they had been doing this for years instead of having just met. They talked while they cooked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up on a ranch in South Texas, about his father who had been a hard man with impossible standards. She told him about her childhood in Missouri, about the parents she had lost to influenza when she was 16. "Is that when you became a teacher?" he asked. "Not right away," she said. "First I worked as a maid for a wealthy family. They had children, I sometimes helped with their lessons, and the wife noticed I was good with them. She was the one who encouraged me to go to normal school and get certified. She even helped pay for it." "She sounds like a good woman." "She was," Penelope said. "I was sad to leave her when I married Thomas, but she understood. She said love was worth any sacrifice." "Was it?" Harrison asked quietly. "Worth it, I mean." Penelope thought about it, really thought about it. "Yes," she said finally. "I loved Thomas. He was not perfect, and this life was not what I thought it would be, but I do not regret marrying him. I just regret that we did not have more time." Harrison nodded, and something in his expression made her think he understood more than she had said. After that, his visits became regular. He came every few days, always with some excuse. He had brought her supplies from town, or her fence needed mending, or he wanted to check that her roof was secure before the next storm. She knew they were just excuses, that he was checking on her because he cared, and that knowledge sent warm flutters through her chest that she tried hard to ignore. But it became harder to ignore as weeks turned into a month, and then 2. Harder to ignore the way her heart leaped when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Harder to ignore how much she looked forward to his visits, how empty the cabin felt in the days between them. Harder to ignore the way she caught him looking at her sometimes, his eyes soft and full of something that made her breath catch. Winter arrived in earnest in early December, sweeping down from the mountains with howling winds and temperatures that plunged below freezing at night. Penelope was grateful every single day for the mountain of wood Harrison had split. She kept her cabin warm and snug, and when he visited now, he stomped snow from his boots before coming inside. "Storm is supposed to be bad tonight," he said on one such visit in mid-December. "I wanted to make sure you were prepared." "I have plenty of wood and food," she assured him. "I will be fine." He nodded but looked troubled. Still, it worries me, you being out here alone. If something happened, if you got sick or hurt, no one would know for days. I have survived this long, she pointed out, but his worry touched her. No one had worried about her in a long time. I know you have, he said. You are stronger than you look, but that does not mean I am not going to worry anyway. Their eyes met and held, and the air between them suddenly felt charged with something electric. Penelope's pulse quickened. She should look away, she knew she should, but she could not seem to make herself do it. Penelope, Harrison said, his voice rough. I should tell you something. What is it? She whispered. I do not come out here just to check on you, he said. I mean, I do, but that is not the only reason. The truth is, I come because I want to see you, because I think about you all the time. Because when I am at the ranch working, half my mind is always here, wondering what you are doing, if you are warm enough, if you are happy. He took a step closer. I know it has only been a couple months. I know you are still grieving your husband. And I know I probably have no right to feel this way, but I do. I care about you, Penelope, more than I should. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Harrison, she started, but did not know what to say, because the truth was, she felt it too. Had been feeling it for weeks now, this growing warmth in her chest whenever he was near, this sense that the world was brighter and more manageable when he was in it. You do not have to say anything, he said quickly. I just wanted you to know. I will keep coming by as long as you will let me, with no expectations. I needed you to know how I feel. I do have to say something, she said, finding her voice, because it would not be fair to let you think your feelings are one-sided. The truth is, Harrison, I look forward to your visits more than anything. You have become the best part of my days. When I see you riding up, I feel like I can breathe properly again. And that scares me, because I should not feel this way so soon. Thomas has only been gone 7 months. What kind of wife does that make me? It makes you human, Harrison said gently. Grief is not a straight line, Penelope, and you are allowed to find happiness again. Thomas would want that for you, would not he? She thought about her husband, about his easy smile and kind heart. Yes, she admitted. He would. He never would have wanted me to be alone and miserable. Then let me make you happy, Harrison said, reaching out to take her hand. His touch sent warmth racing up her arm. Let me take care of you, not because you need taking care of, but because I want to. Because the thought of spending my days with you is the only thing that makes sense to me anymore. We barely know each other, she said weakly, but her hand tightened on his. Then let us get to know each other better, he said. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am just asking for a chance, for us to see where this goes. She looked up at him, at this man who had come into her life at her lowest moment and given her not just wood for the winter, but hope, who had shown her kindness without expecting anything in return, who looked at her like she was something precious and worth protecting. All right, she said softly. Yes, let us see where this goes. The smile that broke across his face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture so tender it made her eyes sting. I am going to make you so happy, he promised. I swear it. And standing there in her small, warm cabin with her hand in his, Penelope believed him. The winter was indeed harsh, but Penelope barely noticed. Harrison came by 3 or 4 times a week now, whenever he could get away from the ranch. They spent long evenings together talking by the fire, learning each other's histories and hopes and dreams. He taught her how to shoot his rifle properly, so she could defend herself and hunt small game. She taught him to read better, as he had only had a few years of schooling as a boy and was self-conscious about his limited education. You are a natural teacher, he told her one evening as they worked through a newspaper he had brought from town. Patient and clear, Those students of yours were lucky. I miss it sometimes, she admitted. Teaching, I mean. There is something satisfying about helping someone learn. You are helping me, he pointed out, and I am grateful for it. The other hands give me less grief now that I can read the supply orders without struggling. She smiled and squeezed his arm. These casual touches had become natural between them, easy and comfortable. Sometimes he would put his arm around her shoulders as they sat by the fire. Sometimes she would lean against him, feeling safe and warm. The first time he kissed her was on a cold January night. He had stayed later than usual, and when he finally stood to leave, she walked him to the door. They stood there for a moment, neither wanting to say goodbye. I should go, he said, but made no move to leave. You should, she agreed, but stepped closer to him instead. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Penelope, he said, his voice low and rough with wanting. Yes, she whispered, answering the question he had not quite asked. He kissed her softly, gently, like she was something that might break. It was nothing like the passionate kisses she had shared with Thomas in the early days of their marriage. This was tender and careful and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark and intense. I love you, he said. I know it is fast, but I do. I love you. I love you too, she said, and was amazed to find it was true. Somewhere between that first day when he had split her wood and now, she had fallen completely in love with Harrison Garrett. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she melted into him. They stood in her doorway kissing until they were both breathless, until he finally forced himself to pull away. I really need to go, he said raggedly, because if I stay any longer I am not going to want to leave at all. Then do not leave, she said boldly. Stay, Penelope, I cannot. You are not my wife, it would not be proper. Then make me your wife, she said. Marry me, Harrison. He stared at her, shocked. Are you serious? Completely serious, she said. I love you, you love me, we are both adults. What are we waiting for? I have nothing to offer you, he said. I am just a ranch hand. I do not own any land, I have hardly any money saved. You deserve better. I have land, she pointed out. 40 acres, and what I need is not money, it is a partner, someone to build a life with, and that is you, Harrison. You are what I need. You are sure? He asked, searching her face. This is not just because you are lonely or grateful, I am sure, she said firmly. I have never been more sure of anything. He kissed her again, hard and fierce, and when he pulled back he was grinning. Then yes. Yes, I will marry you. Tomorrow, if you will have me, she laughed, giddy with joy and relief and love. Tomorrow might be rushing it, but soon as we can arrange it. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Alpine, with the preacher's wife and the general store owner serving as witnesses. Penelope wore her best dress, which Harrison had paid to have cleaned and mended in town. Harrison wore a new shirt and vest he had purchased for the occasion, his hair neatly combed and his jaw freshly shaved. Do you, Harrison Garrett, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? The preacher asked. I do, Harrison said, his voice clear and strong, his eyes never leaving Penelope's face. And do you, Penelope Barrett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Texas, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Harrison cupped her face in his hands and kissed her sweetly, and Penelope felt like her heart might burst from happiness. After so many months of struggle and loneliness and fear, she had found this. A good man who loved her, a new beginning, hope for the future. They spent their wedding night in her small cabin, which was now their cabin. Harrison made love to her with tenderness and passion, and afterward they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, talking and laughing in the darkness. I am going to build you a bigger bed, he said. shifting to try to find a comfortable position in the cramped space. "And maybe add a room or two to this cabin. It is too small for us." "It is too small for a family," she said, then bit her lip, wondering if it was too soon to mention such things. But Harrison just pulled her closer. "A family," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "I would like that. Would you?" "Very much," she said. "Though perhaps we should wait a bit, make sure we can support ourselves first." "Smart and beautiful," he said, kissing her forehead. "How did I get so lucky?" "I think I am the lucky one," she said. "You saved my life, Harrison." "No," he said seriously. "You saved mine. I was just going through the motions before I met you, working every day with nothing to work toward. You gave me a reason. You gave me a future. I am the one who should be grateful." She kissed him and they made love again, slower this time, learning each other's bodies and preferences. When they finally fell asleep, the cabin was warm and the wood pile outside was still high, and Penelope thought that she had never been happier in her entire life. Harrison gave notice at the Double R Ranch the next week. The foreman was sorry to see him go, but understood when Harrison explained that he would be working his own land now. They parted on good terms, with the foreman telling Harrison there would always be work for him if he needed it. With both of them working together, the 40 acres seemed suddenly full of possibility. They planned where they would plant crops come spring, where they might build a barn for animals. Harrison had some money saved and Penelope's late husband's debts had been paid off by selling some equipment, so they had a small cushion to work with. "We could raise cattle," Harrison suggested one evening as they pored over plans by lamplight. "Start small, just a few head, and build up from there." "And chickens," Penelope added, "for eggs and meat, and maybe a milk cow." "A vegetable garden too," he said. "You could can food for the winter. My mother used to do that. We always ate well, even in the lean times, because she was good about putting food by." They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming dreams. It would be hard work, they both knew that, but they would be doing it together, and that made all the difference. As the winter slowly gave way to early spring, they began to implement their plans. Harrison built a chicken coop, and they bought 6 hens from a neighbor. Penelope started seeds in small pots on the windowsill, preparing for the garden she would plant once the danger of frost had passed. They worked from dawn to dusk most days, but Penelope had never felt more alive. One evening in late March, as they were finishing supper, Penelope felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She stood abruptly and rushed outside, making it just past the door before she was sick. Harrison followed her out, holding her hair back and rubbing her back. "Are you all right?" he asked worriedly when she had finished. "Did you eat something bad?" "I do not think so," she said, wiping her mouth with her handkerchief. "Unless you are sick too." "No, I feel fine." He studied her face in the dim light. "How long have you been feeling poorly?" "This is the first time I have been sick," she said. "But I have been tired lately, and my monthly courses." She trailed off, counting back in her head, and her eyes went wide. "Harrison, I think I might be expecting." His expression went from worried to stunned to delighted in the space of a heartbeat. "Really, you think so? I am late," she said, "and I am never late, and the sickness just now." She pressed a hand to her stomach, awed by the possibility. "We should not get too excited yet, it is early still. But yes, I think I might be carrying." He let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around. "We are going to have a baby." "Harrison, put me down, I am going to be sick again," she said, but she was laughing. He set her down carefully, treating her like she was made of spun glass. "Are you all right? Do you need to lie down? Should I fetch the doctor?" "I am fine," she assured him. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, but yes, we should probably have the doctor confirm it when we go to town next." The doctor did confirm it 2 weeks later. Penelope was about 2 months along, he estimated, which meant the baby would arrive in October. Harrison walked around grinning like a fool for days afterward, his hand straying constantly to Penelope's still flat belly. "I cannot believe we are going to be parents," he kept saying. "I am going to be a father." "You are going to be a wonderful father," Penelope told him, and meant it. She had seen how gentle he was with the animals, how patient and kind. Their child would be lucky to have him. As her belly grew with the spring and summer, so did their little homestead. The garden flourished under Penelope's care, producing more vegetables than they could eat. She spent long hours learning to can and preserve food, with guidance from some of the neighboring women who had accepted her now that she was respectably married. The chickens laid eggs faithfully, and Harrison bought 3 young heifers that would eventually form the foundation of their herd. He also made good on his promise to expand the cabin. With help from a few neighbors, he added a second room that would serve as a bedroom for them, leaving the main room to be a combination kitchen, dining area, and nursery. He built a proper bed frame, and they bought a mattress in town, a luxury that made Penelope nearly weep with gratitude after months of the narrow, lumpy cot. "Nothing but the best for my wife," Harrison said, kissing her soundly. As summer faded into autumn, Penelope grew large and ungainly. Her back ached and her ankles swelled, and she had to stop working in the garden because bending over made her dizzy. But she had never been happier. Harrison doted on her constantly, doing all the heavy work and insisting she rest. "You are growing our child," he said whenever she protested. "That is the hardest work there is." The baby came on a cool October evening, arriving faster than either of them had expected. Harrison rode for the doctor, but the baby did not wait, and in the end, it was just the 2 of them. Penelope labored for 6 hours, gripping Harrison's hand and trying not to scream. And then, as the sun was setting, their son was born. "It is a boy," Harrison said, his voice choked with emotion as he held the tiny, squalling infant. "Penelope, we have a son." She reached for the baby, and Harrison laid him gently in her arms. He was red-faced and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." They named him Henry Thomas Garrett, after Harrison's grandfather and Penelope's late husband. Harrison held his son and cried unashamedly, overcome with love and wonder. "I am going to give you everything," he promised the baby. "Everything I never had. You are going to grow up knowing you are loved and wanted. You are going to have opportunities. I swear it." Penelope watched her husband cradle their son and felt her heart overflow. A year ago she had been alone and desperate, struggling to survive, certain she would die before winter ended. And now look at her, married to a man she loved desperately, with a beautiful, healthy son and a home that was finally starting to feel secure. The doctor arrived an hour later and checked them both over, pronouncing mother and baby healthy. He charged them $3, which Harrison paid without complaint. "You did well," the doctor told Penelope. "Most first-time mothers have a much harder time of it. You are stronger than you look." After he left, Harrison climbed into bed beside Penelope, careful not to jostle her or the baby. They lay there together, the 3 of them, as the stars came out and the night sounds of the Texas wilderness filled the air. "I love you," Harrison said softly. "Both of you, more than anything in this world." "I love you too," Penelope said. "Thank you for saving me, for giving me this life." "Thank you for letting me," he said, kissing her temple. "Thank you for trusting me, for loving me, for giving me a family." Little Henry made a soft sound in his sleep, and they both looked down at him with matching expressions of wonder and adoration. "You remember that first day?" Penelope asked. "When you rode up and I was trying to chop wood. I remember thinking you were the most stubborn woman I had ever seen," Harrison said with a soft laugh. trying so hard to do something that was clearly beyond you but refusing to give up. I remember being terrified, she admitted. Of you, of the winter, of everything, but also hopeful somehow, like maybe things were not as hopeless as they seemed. They were not, he said. They never were. You just needed someone to stack the wood high enough to last. She smiled at the memory. She had been so weak, so desperate, and he had been so kind, so generous. He had stacked the wood high and told her it would last the winter, and it had. More than that, it had lasted long enough for something beautiful to grow between them. This should last the winter, she said softly, echoing his words from that long-ago day. Our love, our family, this life we are building, it will last all the winters to come. All of them, Harrison agreed, pulling her closer. Every single one. The years that followed were not always easy. There were droughts and hard winters, sick animals and failed crops. But Harrison and Penelope faced everything together, their bond growing stronger with each challenge they overcame. They added 3 more children to their family over the next 8 years. A daughter named Hannah, another son named William, and finally a daughter named Patricia. Their ranch grew and prospered. What had started as 40 acres of rocky land and a tiny cabin became a thriving operation with 100 head of cattle, a proper barn, a house with 4 bedrooms, and hired hands to help with the work. Harrison's dream of giving his children opportunities came true. All 4 attended school, and Henry eventually went to college in Austin, the first in either family to do so. But no matter how much their circumstances changed, Harrison and Penelope never forgot those early days. Every winter, when the first cold snap came, Harrison would make a point of stacking the wood pile especially high beside their house. "This should last the winter," he would say, and Penelope would laugh and kiss him, both of them remembering a young woman too weak to chop wood and the cowboy who had saved her in more ways than one. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. Friends and neighbors came from all over to celebrate, filling their large house with laughter and music. At one point in the evening, Henry stood up to make a toast. "I want to thank my parents," he said, raising his glass. "Not just for this wonderful party, but for everything they have given us." They started with nothing, with just 40 acres and a lot of determination, and they built this. He gestured around at the prosperous ranch, the happy family. But more than that, they showed us what love looks like. Real love, the kind that weathers storms and hardships, the kind that lasts. There was not a dry eye in the room as everyone raised their glasses. Harrison pulled Penelope close and kissed her, not caring who was watching. "What are you thinking?" she asked him later when the party was winding down and they stood together on the porch watching the sun set. "I am thinking about the day I met you," he said. "How you were struggling with that axe, so determined to do something impossible. How scared and desperate you were, but trying so hard not to show it." "I was terrified," she admitted, "of everything. And I am thinking about how lucky I am," he continued, "that I happened to ride past that day, that I stopped to help, that you let me into your life. I am the lucky one," she said, leaning into him. "You gave me everything, Harrison, a home, a family, a life I never dreamed I could have." "We gave each other everything," he corrected gently. "That is how love works, Penelope. It is not one person saving another. It is 2 people choosing each other every single day and building something together." She turned to face him, this man who had been her salvation and her partner and her great love. His hair was graying now and there were lines on his face, but his eyes were still the same sage green that had captivated her all those years ago. "I would choose you every time," she said. "In every lifetime, in every circumstance. You are my home, Harrison Garrett. And you are mine," he said, kissing her softly. "Always and forever." They stood there together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and gold. Behind them, their house was full of family and love and laughter. The wood pile was stacked high for the coming winter. And Penelope Barrett Garrett, who had once been too weak to chop wood and too frightened to hope, knew that she had everything she had ever needed. She had love. She had family. She had a partner who would stand beside her through every season, every storm, every joy and sorrow that life might bring. And she had learned that sometimes salvation comes not from being strong enough to survive alone, but from being brave enough to let someone help you, to let someone love you, to build a life together that is far richer than anything you could have created by yourself. That first winter, when Harrison had stacked the wood high and told her it would last, he had given her more than fuel for her stove. He had given her hope. And that hope had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. A love that truly would last forever, through all the winters yet to come.